Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to one of the hopefully many online conversations we have here at OccaSoftware.
Mm.
I'm sure that many of you have known this person next to me. Well, not really next to me,
Yep.
but on the other camera,
Hey, y'all.
Michael. But I've never really shown myself online. I'm Arya. I'm the marketing chief for OccaSoftware, and I'm basically the person responsible for putting myself into this YouTube Q&A, even though I dread this very much.
Yep. Yeah, and
Uh,
I'm Michael. I'm the head of OccaSoftware. So yeah, pretty cool. Kind of do everything like top to bottom, focusing on like the vision and the strategy as well as like the day-to-day stuff as well. And I make all the assets too.
yeah,
So
I will talk a lot more about OccaSoftware in like later on this episode.
mhm. Ooh.
But anyways, welcome to the show. I'll be your host today. We'll talk about how in the game development world has evolved, why it's so cool. Talk about OccaSoftware, what Michael's background is. I mean, things that maybe a lot of people don't know about you. Basically, I'm just looking for a way to refresh the things that I've learned when I started working with OccaSoftware that I might have forgotten a little bit.
Mhm.
So yeah, welcome to my onboarding. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? I'm good. How's your night going? What time is it there for you?
Good. It's 7:15 or
Nice. Not
something
too
like
late.
that.
Yeah.
That's also the reality of our work, actually, because we basically live 12 hours apart, time-wise, which is really
Yeah.
cool because you're just starting your day and then like, this is
Yeah. It is kind of
me.
tough though sometimes because we have to like get on calls like kind of late or kind of early, but um yeah, I think it's cool that we make it work.
Yeah, well, TGIF, it's Friday.
Yeah.
So today I'll be asking you some questions. Are you ready for the first one?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
So can you tell me a little bit what is actually software? I'm sure that a lot of people have no idea what it is.
Yeah, so Focus Software is like it's a company, and so basically what we do is we act as a platform for game developers to help them make better games. So right now, what we've been focused on is shaders and visual effects and things like that. And traditionally, we were selling mostly through the Unity Asset Store, but we feel like now that we can offer a better experience offering through our website. And so we've recently sort of transformed the whole company to be able to offer all of our assets and tools through our website so that you can do a free trial, you can have a monthly subscription, so you only pay like as you're using it and other things like that. But like sort of ultimately, we are just really focused on like making sure that game developers are able to build better games. And we just want to sort of stand behind the developers and let them focus on building their game while we focus more on like the technical details and other things like that, sort of like unlocking game developers.
Yeah, just like letting them run their ideas.
Hmm.
Pretty much.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So when did you start it actually?
Um, Let me think. Well, it's kind of like a bit of a weird journey because there wasn't like an exact start date. What sort of happened was I started getting into Unity and learning about game development. And while I was doing that, I like was on a sabbatical from my work, and like I was kind of just like exploring the Unity development space, and I found that it can be really challenging for developers to sort of build out a lot of the systems and core things that they need in order to like get their game off the ground. And so like over time, I started developing tools and assets for game developers to make things easier for them. So some of our initial sort of releases were around like a procedural skybox, so that you don't really need to, have our assets or anything in place if you want to have a nice looking sky. And that eventually evolved into what we have as Altos today, which is like so much more than just the skybox, as well as Buto, which is like a volumetric fog and lighting solution. And so kind of focusing on these volumetric rendering things and really focusing on like these more technical uh, sort of features that it might be really challenging for a game developer who's more comfortable with C Sharp to have to learn about like compute shaders or how to write shaders from scratch and how to integrate that into the rendering pipeline and things like that. And so it was kind of like a gradual journey where I was developing these things and then started releasing them, and people were expressing a lot of interest. And so kind of continuing to build that up. But I think we've been doing it now for like 2 or maybe 3 years.
Yeah. So how did you actually started it? Like that was not your background at all then. You were sabbatical for work.
What do you mean?
How did you learn? Like how did you actually start learning all these technical things like C sharp and stuff?
Oh yeah. Well, I've been programming since like a very, very long time. Um, I started programming, I think, in like middle school or something like that. And so I have background in programming, and I did some programming at some startups that I worked at in high school, and then sort of continued that journey since a very long time. And so part of the continuation of that journey was exploring more of the graphic side of programming. And so Unity seemed like a really good place to start because there are so many sort of very useful tutorials and pieces of information, and Unity's built to made Unity's being used to make some really incredible games. And so having that sort of base to learn from other really great game developers and people who use Unity as a base made it a lot easier to get up to speed on what's going on, and then also sort of thinking about like how we can offer the most benefit to the most game developers, and knowing that most people are using Unity. And that seems like a really good place to start.
So when you first started, do you have any idea like who you're making this for?
Hmm.
Like who you're creating this for?
Yeah,
Did you
definitely. So I think that we sort of lean really deep into like not studios, but much like not like big studios, but much more like indie studios, like really like high performing, tight teams that want to deliver and develop games that are really high quality as quickly as possible. And we're sort of here to help enable that, as well as focusing on sort of like more hobbyist game developers who are doing things like nights or weekends or things like that, because building a game is a really complex undertaking. And so having the ability to pull these things off the shelf that add these really big features can be really helpful. And so we're basically building primarily for the sort of intersection of those two groups.
and is that also how you measure success of OccaSoftware? That's beyond, I mean, financial metrics. How useful are to the community?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like how do I explain it? So like basically one of the core things that I think about as being like are we being successful is looking at whether game developers are actually able to leverage our assets and use them in their projects, and take those projects um, to Steam, to itch, and actually get those projects into players' hands. And so like regardless of whether our project our assets are like helping with the development pipeline, the most important thing to me is making sure that they've helped with that development pipeline in a way that actually delivered that project into the player hands, because like it is really challenging. And so there are a lot of things that we could do that aren't that important, that maybe like help in some way but don't really help these like foundational pieces or very time consuming pieces that would otherwise make it very difficult for the developer to release the game. And so we're kind of focusing more on that area, making sure that like, okay, are these developers actually being benefited and maximizing the sort of value that we're giving to the developers.
What challenge do you think is like the biggest for indie studios right now?
Ooh, I think one thing that's sort of like a secret hidden challenge is that a lot of like AAA game development studios have really good sort of analytics and sort of like data infrastructure on telemetry and usage. And I think it's a little bit more challenging for indie developers to stand that sort of thing up because it does require a very different set of skills than what you would need for just making a game. And I say just making a game because it's like obviously a really complex, project. Um, but getting that access to that telemetry and analytics and things like that really helps you better understand how players are interacting with your game. And the fact that these AAA companies have this piece of information allows them to better understand how their customers are actually using the game and what challenges they might be facing when they're playing it and what sticking points they might have. And so there are like some analytic solutions out there, but they're kind of hard to wrangle and don't necessarily give you like enough detail. So like you could use Google Analytics, for example, but it can be very difficult to really see like how are people actually interacting with the game. And so as a indie game developer, it can be pretty difficult to, know which analytics tool to use and how to integrate it and what data points you need to track and how to track it, how to view it, and things like that. It's like very much more gets into like the data science side. And I think that's like a big secret challenge for a lot of indie developers is that like this is a really big piece of making successful games is understanding really deeply how people are actually interacting with it and engaging with it. But that's like a whole different domain than traditional game development.
So what's your tips for indie developers having no access to that? What would you do if you were them?
Yeah, well, actually, we're kind of in sort of a similar situation ourselves
Yeah.
because we don't do any telemetry or tracking or analytics on how developers are like actually using our products in their projects because we kind of feel like it would be a bit invasive if we like tried to start including tracking data in our like offline assets. Um, so the way that we try to get around it is just being as close as possible to the developers to understand, what their sticking points are and what feedback they have, and just sort of curating a community around the project. Um, we do like try to do some analytics and telemetry on our website to better understand what the sticking points are there, especially because that's typically like maybe one of the first touch points where it's the easiest to bounce off before joining the community or even finding out that we have a community. But really just being as close as possible to the developers and curating that community and making sure that we're there for people if they have questions and responding to questions and being there for support and things like that.
Yeah, I actually think I think maybe the main solution to a lot of small businesses problems. One privilege that we have though is the community.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Building a really tight community and being able to actually ask questions directly to them. Like if I
Yeah.
have, questions about something in our marketing and I just text this guy from our chat
Mm-hmm.
and then I can find out exactly what it is that is bothering them and finding a way to like find a solution directly based on actual experiences from the customer themselves. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really great tool, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. It's like it's just so powerful to have this community, and it's like one of my favorite parts of the community is when um like someone jumps into the Discord and they ask a question and then someone else from the community like jumps in and like helps out and answers the question right away and maybe walks someone through like a code problem or something like that. I just like love seeing that. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's just like I love this collaborative experience of building
Hmm.
something together and then being able to share
Hmm.
what you're working on and like
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
powerful it is so far.
Yeah. Yeah, like with the Made with OccaSoftware thing where we feature like the games of people using OccaSoftware assets. And like that video that you made of the Made with OccaSoftware like trailer showcasing some of those really cool games was really cool. I mean, it's already gotten so many views on
Yeah,
YouTube.
shout out
Like,
to everyone.
yeah.
Shout out to everyone.
Yeah, big shout out.
Yeah, I think indie games are really cool. I mean, I came into this industry knowing not much about it, but community, because I've got like my cousin is really into gaming,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, and his what, like 10 or 11 or something. He's a kid,
Hmm. What
but
games does he play?
honestly, I don't know. There's like so many games that he showed me, and I didn't know what games he played. But he last year at this family gathering, he would show me like, "Oh, follow my YouTube because I'm doing game reviews and stuff." Like, what?
That's cool. Maybe he can make some game reviews for us. Play some
Maybe
made with OccaSoftware games.
that'd be really cool, wouldn't it?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah,
he would show me all these things, and they're like, "Oh, please comment on my YouTube," and because I've got so
nice.
many comments already, like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, that's really nice." Like that's my first interaction with the indie game world, which I think,
Mhm.
oh, really that's really fun.
Honestly, like good for him with the marketing side. Like I think a lot of indie game developers need to be more comfortable doing like what he's doing. Like literally reaching out to people and asking them to engage with it and asking them for their thoughts on it and things like that. Like I think a lot of indie game devs don't really love sharing their projects. Maybe it feels too early, or they're not comfortable with how it looks or where it's at. But a lot of like things that I think it's really important to sort of more build in public and let people know what you're working on and how it's looking and how it's progressing, and bring people along with you on that journey as it like improves and as you put more effort into it and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's also the main selling point of indie games is
Hmm.
that you get to be part of the process in itself, and that's
Hmm.
super nice.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think so.
yeah, which is I think lacking from big studio games with big productions.
Hmm.
Obviously, what do you think? Why are indie games better than big studio games?
Well, I think that every game, like personally, I really think that every game has something special to offer. They're all sort of like a kind of like window into the team that made it and what their values are, and how they think about telling a story or telling a narrative or things like that. And so like indie games are really interesting because they tend to have a really focused and tight narrative that's like really specifically based on like one or two or three people's like direct experience. um AAA games can also sort of be similar if they have like a very strong director for the game, but also like it's kind of interesting to see how AAA games are sort of a product of the company's sort of vision and the company narrative that they're telling, um, and like how the company sort of feels about the world. And so it's kind of interesting to see games in that lens, where it's almost a way to like experience an entire team's vision for what the world is like, and um, who people are and things like that. Like, and you can see that even in the storylines or the narratives or the dialogue or even in the writing, um, and even in the art style as well. Like, how does this team like imagine the world? And so I think it's really cool that you can kind of see that whole um, that like you can see how indie developers see the world and how they the stories that they want to tell, as well as see all the way through to like these big teams and the stories that they're trying to tell as well.
Yeah, and I think also maybe for indie games, I think the freedom is, I think we
Hmm.
have more freedom to create things that we want,
Hmm.
um, not actually having any, yeah, kind of limitations from
Hmm. Totally.
corporations.
Yeah, totally. Like as like a bigger studio, maybe if you're public, like at Blizzard or something like that, there can be a lot more sort of constraints on what would be okay to maybe produce. Like you might not want to produce a critique of capitalism if you're like um, a public company or something like that. Um, that's kind of like a simplified example, but yeah, it's like definitely where smaller games have a lot less sort of constraints and a lot less stakeholders that might say no or might not feel comfortable with telling a particular story in a particular way. And so indie games really have the opportunity, in the same way that indie movies do, to kind of push the boundaries of storytelling. And yeah.
Yeah, I love that you can actually make it as good as you want or as bad as you want.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and just kind of, it just really depends on how you see the project and how you wanted it to be. And I think that's really cool, which is what I really respect about what we do here at OccaSoftware, is
Hmm.
kind of sort of helping them to bring their ideas into concrete project without
Hmm.
having to spend too much time like learning about, oh, how to make this, how to make that. They get to just not not be constrained by technicalities. I
Hmm.
think that's
Hmm.
really great.
Yeah, I think so too. It's cool. Like they get to just sort of focus more on the vision and the gameplay and less on like dealing with some technical like caveats in how Unity works, for example, where you normally would just have to do this, but because of the way that Unity works, like you have to do this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing as well, and then you have to know about this constraint, and so it's a lot easier if you have like someone taking care of that for you.
Yeah. But what do you think is the like what do you think is the most important skill as an indie developer
Mm,
that one needs to have?
yeah, it's an interesting question. Um, I think you know, kind of just doing it.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to feel, I guess, overwhelmed or to get distracted by like, oh, look at what this person's doing, look at what this person's doing, what about this project? Oh, maybe I should change my direction, kind of questions and answers like that. Um, Whereas I think that to be successful, like really the buck stops with you as the developer, especially if it's a solo project. And so you need to be comfortable like every day sitting down and literally just doing it. Like whether that means just working on the narrative or just designing the gameplay or just hacking out code or just optimizing. Like you have to sit down and actually do the work. And so like not getting distracted and not like doom scrolling on Twitter, Instagram, or something like that. And just really like, okay, I have my 2 hours of time. I'm gonna crush it for these 2 hours, and you can get like really a lot done. And so I think just doing it is like a really powerful skill for an indie to have.
Yeah, I think also what limits a lot of indie developers is, I mean, again, like coming back to what you said earlier about not wanting to share the progress of your game, is that a
Hmm.
lot of people are afraid to be seen as amateur or bad. They're
Hmm.
afraid of like showing the bad side of I mean, the bad section of what they've been
Hmm.
working on, but just winging
Yeah,
it
like,
as you go.
like
You
behind the
might,
scenes.
yeah, and you might learn something, I think, when you share and then you get feedback from the community
Hmm.
to not stress too much about perfection.
Hmm.
I think what we talked about on one meeting, and this is a really good tip for everyone, is that it doesn't have to be flashy, but it has to be valuable. And I
Hmm.
think that goes for games.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think part of what makes it kind of challenging for games is that um, I think two things. So first, like for AAA game companies, they like don't talk about their games until it's ready to be super flashy. And then the only content you see from them is like the flashiest of content. Like it's like super sizzly, like fast-paced gameplay trailers with nice motion graphics and things like that. Um, and they don't really give that much insight into like the behind the scenes or bringing you along with the journey. But I think that just sort of highlights like a total difference between how indie developers sort of need to work and should work, and what makes indie special versus like AAA. And then yeah, so I think the other thing as well is that like when you're building out the project, like it can be tough if you show like early gameplay or early graphics because you might feel like it'll turn some people off. But I think that it's sort of like, do you really want to focus on the haters? Do you know what I mean? Like it might turn some people off, but it'll also attract a bunch of people who are interested in maybe the gameplay that you're showing at a high level or something like that. And so showing them early like what you're working on, even if it's not final, I think the people who are most excited about it will be happy to join you along with that journey. And so like being confident that like, you know, directionally I'm working on a game, I think it's going to be valuable. I think it'll be interesting for people to play and fun. And so just feeling comfortable talking about it and presenting it to people regardless of the stage that you're currently in.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think is next for indie games world? What's like any revolution is happening, or are you preparing for something? What do you think will happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, AI is like sort of the big, in my mind, like the sort of obvious sort of challenge that indie will have to figure out. So like right now it's kind of in a weird place because like a lot of indie development is about being artisanal and like handcrafting things and one person making everything top to bottom for like small projects, or like a really tight team doing everything and really giving like a lot of love and care to a project. Um, in contrast, like bigger studios don't really have that same sort of like vibe or impression, and so they will adopt AI, and that AI will let them work more efficiently and produce more content. Uh, and maybe that content won't necessarily be at like the same high level of like handcrafted content, but they will end up having more content. And so what will be challenging for indie developers is sort of trying to figure out how to, you know, how to adapt in a world where AAA is able to, outproduce the content, not just at the same level that they're doing now with bigger teams, but also more efficiently by leveraging like AI to generate, one person making 5x the amount of content that they are today. Um, and so trying to understand like how indie will respond to that and whether they'll sort of like maybe think about start adopting AI in different contexts, whether it's for like AI dialogue or something like that, or AI modeling, AI empowered modeling or something. Um, Thinking about how indie will sort of adapt to this new world where AI will be present and people will be using it to develop more content, trying to understand what specifically is most valuable to the players and what lets us still express our vision and is still true to being like artisanal and handcrafted while taking advantage of this new tool. I think it's kind of similar to like, like at a certain point, people stopped writing things with like pen and paper and started typing it on a computer. And I kind of see that in a similar way as like AI creating things, right? Like when you're doing things like with pen and paper, like, you have to form the letters. And so there's an art to forming the letters, right? And everyone took a handwriting class. Well, I did. Like everyone took
Me
like a
too.
handwriting class. Yeah. And my teacher was like, oh, you have to form the letter this way and you have to make your T like this. And in my head, I'm like, I don't have to do any of that. I'm just going to type it on my keyboard, right? Like,
I never thought of it like that actually. But also at the same time, what's making handwritten things a lot more special.
mhm, mhm,
That's the main selling point. Very
exactly. And
personal.
so, no, go ahead.
No, I'm done. Like,
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say it's like exactly like that. And when you're like trying to say something really special to someone now, the way that you might say that is with like a handwritten note where you really take the time to like do your handwriting nicely, and like take the time to handwrite it because it shows that it's like, oh, this is extra artisanal. Like I put extra love and care into this.
yeah, and it's okay if you've got scratches on it because you know that
Hmm.
it's somebody wrote it, and that
Hmm.
I think that takes a lot of extra effort to do that than writing, than
Hmm.
typing something on the computer, obviously.
Yeah. And so I think part of the challenge for indie will be like, how do we show people that this project is like the equivalent of handwritten, right? Like that we didn't use AI for this model, or that we didn't use AI for this texture or something like that. So that people can really appreciate the extra work and the extra love and care that people put into it. Yeah.
I love that. That's the end of my questions,
Nice.
actually.
Cool.
And yeah, thanks so much. I really love that. I think that's a great ending to it. I just never really put hand. I never actually thought about handwriting being the equivalent of AI, honestly. Like, oh yeah, handwriting is typing. It's replaced by typing. It becomes special. Just
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, AI is going to have a lot of changes, I think, in how games are made and stuff like that. And I think we're
yeah.
just really, really early in seeing how that all continue to evolve.
All right. Thanks for joining our Q&A. Thanks for
Yeah.
doing this, Michael.
Thanks for hosting it.
Yeah, and thanks.
Good chatting about the company and where we're going and where we've been.
Yeah, thanks for just like enlightening me with a lot of things in the past, I don't know, like half hour or something. Um, and thanks for everyone who's watching our first onboarding series, hopefully one of the many. And don't forget to like this video and drop any questions you might have. And we'll probably do this again next week, yeah?
Yeah, and if there are any questions, like it would be cool to answer them in the next video to make sure that like whatever questions people have, we can talk about them and chat more about those things.
Yeah, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We're really trying our best.
Yeah.
And see you guys, and I'll see you Monday, Michael.
All right, sounds good. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.